Incredible! Under pressure from the Ukrainian armed forces, Russian troops are retreating from the Kherson region. Xi Jinping is in a panic. There's a coup in China. The generals have turned against the regime. Already 3,000 have been arrested. The Russians were defeated near Kupiansk, mass desertions, and many prisoners. Exclusive footage of street fighting. A spectacular attack on an oil refinery in Kuban. 4 Flamingo missiles struck the plant precisely, a facility involved in the production of fighter jets. Putin is furious. Donbas is not for sale. Zelenskyy refused $800 billion that was offered to him to withdraw from Donbas. Large-scale NATO and alliance exercises are rehearsing a response to a Russian attack. A scandal at the Davos Forum. Representatives from the US, Russia, and Ukraine used the services of prostitutes. A protest mood is brewing in Bashkortostan. A real uprising is coming. The goal is separation from Russia. My name is Katerina Esterenko, and right now, here are the top stories. But first, please like this video and subscribe to our channel so we don't lose touch with you. Across the vast expanse, YouTube. A real coup is brewing in China against Xi Jinping. In the Celestial Empire, 2 key generals, their families, and about 3,000 military personnel have already been arrested. This includes the general who is called the #1 in China. Zhang Yuxia is the highest-ranking general of the People's Liberation Army of China. He is second in the military hierarchy after the chairman of the PRC, Xi Jinping. According to the official version, he and other military officials are accused of corruption schemes. But that's far from the full extent of the accusations. There is an unofficial version, which is real and definitely more interesting. It concerns the overthrow of Xi's regime.
According to sources cited by the publication, the most serious accusations have been made against Zhang Yuxia: abuse of power, receiving large sums of money for personnel decisions, and passing key technical data about China's nuclear arsenal to the United States. Zhang Yuxia was considered one of the most influential figures in the Chinese military and was part of Xi Jinping's inner circle. The Central Military Commission, of which he is a member, oversees the strategic directions of the Army's development. This includes research, development, and procurement of modern weaponry.
Currently, Zhang is under investigation on suspicion of creating political factions. In other words, attempts to build his own networks of influence that undermine party unity. The investigation became part of Xi's large-scale campaign, Jinping's campaign to purge the army of disloyal and corrupt officers. Still, no one expected that they would eventually target an official of such a high rank. That's why there's unprecedented commotion in China, and all military units in the country are now on alert. The occupiers have lost yet another substation. In temporarily occupied Luhansk, the Kyiv substation was hit. A large fire is observed at the site of the strike. It looks impressive. We're waiting for more details about this attack. The occupiers have also suffered losses in Russia. On the night of January 26th, friendly drones struck the oil refinery in Slavyansk on Kuban. That's in Krasnodar Krai. The fact of the strike has already been confirmed by the investigative committee.
Wow. Wow. Well, if you hit the KSK at 6,000, I would have hit it on the first try. Wow.
This is far from the first attack on this facility. Back in December, Ukrainian defense forces already attacked the mentioned oil refineries. Reading the comments under previous episodes, I see that many of our viewers are from Kazakhstan, Moldova, Europe, and even the USA. We Ukrainians are very grateful to you for your support and proud that we have such reasonable viewers. Let us know in the comments below which country you're watching us from and whether people there support our fight against the empire of evil. I always enjoy reading your comments. And now, let's continue. The most interesting part's coming up. Good news from the Kherson direction. Under intense pressure from the Ukrainian armed forces, the Russian army abandoned its positions on Alexeyevsky Island in the Kherson region. This was announced by the spokesperson for the Southern Defense Forces, Vladislav Voloshin.
On Alexeyevsky Island, our intelligence is recording the abandonment of positions. This happened as a result of active operations by Ukraine's defense forces and the low morale and psychological state of the servicemen who were stationed at those positions.
It continued to clear Kupiansk of the occupiers. Ukrainian armed forces showed how their fighters discovered a group of enemy troops holding positions in a destroyed supermarket and a nearby building. As a result, 2 Russian soldiers were killed and 2 occupiers were taken prisoner. The defense forces also showed what Kupiansk looks like now. Once, life thrived here. People built, loved, raised children, and waited for their loved ones to come home in the evenings. It was an ordinary Ukrainian city, full of life, until Russia came here. The defense of the city continues. There is news from the Lyman and Borova directions. The commander of the assault ground robotic complexes of the 3rd Separate Assault Brigade, with a call sign Makar, says that the Russians continue their attempts to advance in order to push further toward the Sloviansk-Kramatorsk agglomeration and are also trying to move toward the Oskol River. But all of the enemy's offensive actions are systematically thwarted by Ukrainian soldiers.
The enemy does not cease its attempts to carry out offensive actions in the Lyman direction, aiming to capture the city of Lyman and then continue its plans to advance on the Sloviansk-Kramatorsk agglomeration.
And in the Borov direction, they are also persisting in their attempts to move toward the Oskol River. But all such attempts are completely shattered by our steadfast defense of the 3rd Army Corps. The enemy is trying to infiltrate small groups through weak points in the defense of the Ukrainian defenders. They are searching, trying to adapt to the weather conditions, and advancing in groups of 4 or 5 soldiers. But such attempts are detected in time, localized, and eliminated.
More details about what is happening on the front and around it at this very moment in our report.
Russia is once again trying to break through the border. Thus, in the Kharkiv region, the Ukrainian armed forces repelled a new assault by the occupiers, who tried to break through our defenses. According to Viktor Trihabov, head of the communications department of the Joint Forces grouping, the enemy is trying to create a so-called buffer zone in the Kharkiv and Sumy regions. However, they are failing. At the same time, apparently understanding their prospects, the Russian army is hardly using heavy armored vehicles here. Instead, they are advancing in small infantry groups of 15 to 20 people. However, Russia used the tactic of advancing in columns in another direction, near Krovsk. The result is just as predictable. Even as the group was approaching, our reconnaissance drones spotted them, after which they were hit by strike drones and artillery.
The Russian column was destroyed in open field, and the infantry was finished off in the tree line. The artillery was destroyed by precise strikes from Ukrainian kamikaze drones. All that remained at the site for the Russians were burned-out vehicles, dismembered bodies, and 3 prisoners who have now joined Ukraine's exchange pool.
The Russians' attempt to storm Pokrovsk with small groups also ended in failure, according to the 7th Air Assault Corps. On the other side of the city, in the industrial zone to the northwest, strike drones targeted the attacking forces. After that, the positions where the occupiers had taken cover were destroyed by 155mm caliber artillery.
As a result, 3 assault troops were torn apart before they even managed to take up their positions, abandoned by their own, without evacuation or cover. They were apparently wounded from the start and ended up lying forever on the frozen ground.
What's remarkable is that, despite a complete failure near Pokrovsk in 2026, the Russians keep claiming that the settlement has been captured and is under their control. According to experts, this is primarily aimed at the United States, with whom negotiations are taking place in the Arab.
Experience the world-class service and luxury of Emirates, the premier international airline that connects people across the globe with unparalleled comfort, award-winning entertainment, and excellence in every single flight you take with us today. This fake is being traded for concrete facts.
Not least, they are holding their positions near Pokrovsk and in the city itself. The destruction of Russian logistics, which suffers daily from Ukrainian strikes, is helping the Ukrainian armed forces hold on. As a result, even those routes that Russia already considered main ones stop working, and the enemy simply cannot effectively amass forces and go on the attack.
We are now identifying their concentration points in the city, counterattacking and carrying out strikes on specific locations of their deployment, or moving in where the troops are. Right now, it's important to strike at the logistics and supply systems of the Russian troops. For example, those on the Pokrovska or Myrnograd directions. This is very good. We have disrupted their logistics. We've practically cut them off. Although they are partially present in the city of Myrnograd, we are holding positions there with well-fortified areas. Without logistics, they can't attack effectively.
Moreover, if earlier on the Pokrovsk direction Russia was constantly setting deadlines for the fall of the Ukrainian defense, now there's not a word about it. Instead, cautious forecasts are now coming from the defense forces. In particular, if we manage to hold out in Pokrovsk until March, then Russia simply won't be able to advance here any further.
If everything that's been planned works out, then the Russian army will stall. Even now, it's already starting to stall a little. There are the first signs of it. However, it relies on a massive number of personnel, but stalling until spring is quite likely, and these losses will indeed increase. And while they may not yet be completely critical for the Russians, replenishing them will truly become very difficult.
It's also worth mentioning the south of Ukraine. Over the past week, the second hottest spot in this war has become the settlement of Huliaipol. For about a week, the Russians have been actively transferring reserves here to maintain the pace of their advance. However, it is already clear today that this idea has failed.
Well, right in Huliaipol itself yesterday, overall we stabilized the situation. A few days ago, we reinforced our reserves at both the brigade and regimental levels with more experienced personnel. Not just our units that had been formed as volunteers and were stationed in this sector at the time. These are now professionals who are working on specific points within Huliaipol itself.
Moreover, the Ukrainian command, without revealing details for now, said that in the south, not only are they able to hold back the occupiers' offensive, but in some places, they are even driving them out of their positions and successfully counterattacking.
Today, we can say that in one of the directions, due to the Porozhsky front, our defense forces, for example, managed to counterattack Russian positions and reclaim our previous tactical positions. This is the response on the battlefield.
I never cease to admire the courage and heroism of Ukrainian soldiers. They are holding the front and standing up to a huge horde that vastly outnumbers them. That's why I urge you to support the armed forces of Ukraine, and if you can't do so financially, write them words of encouragement in the comments. I know they're watching us. NATO has launched the largest exercises of the year. They are practicing the rapid deployment of troops and equipment in case of a possible Russian attack on the Baltic states or Poland. According to Bild, Germany is playing a key role in the exercises, having effectively become NATO's main defense hub.
The country, more than 10,000 servicemen from 11 member states of the alliance are being deployed. The maneuvers involve 17 ships, 20 military aircraft, and about 1,500 units of heavy equipment, including tanks, missile systems, and military trucks. In
turn, experts note that these military exercises have not only practical, but also political significance. After all, they demonstrate the North Atlantic Alliance's readiness to act collectively, swiftly, and in a coordinated manner, sending a clear signal to Moscow that aggression against NATO member states is unacceptable. We definitely haven't discussed D.8 in this context before. This city recently made headlines due to the World Economic Forum being held there. But now, more intriguing details are emerging. So, during the Economic Forum, the demand for prostitutes in D8 surged sharply. The media reports that the number of related requests during the forum increased by about 4,000%. A Swiss platform that connects sex workers with clients. On regular days, it records an average of about 2 bookings per day. The number of orders rose to 79.
According to the publication, a significant portion of the services users during the forum came from the United States, as well as from countries that are aggressors against Russia and Ukraine. It is also noted that this year, demand for black women has increased significantly. According to media reports, some of the sex workers are not professionals. Among them are students, teachers, and travelers. who are looking for additional sources.
This represents a vital and consistent stream of financial revenue that serves as a primary source of income, ensuring long-term stability and providing the necessary capital required to support various ongoing personal or professional expenses and future investments, including trips to Paris, private jet flights to Dubai, or stays in luxurious chalets. This is the other side of the World Economic Forum. I don't know about other cities, but the forum participants certainly supported Davos's economy. Karma exists. In Zakhovsky, near Moscow, about 5,000 Russians have been without heating and hot water for several days. In this video, a woman complains to a utility worker and asks about the situation. But the utility worker has a typical Russian reaction.
Why do you care? Talk. I live here. My child is freezing. You see, we steal depression. All right, then please introduce yourself. Who are you?
The video also shows dirty water literally pouring down from the ceilings. Obviously, the pipes in the building burst from the cold. Russians are sharing photos of thermometers showing 13 degrees inside their homes. Outside, it's as cold as -30. These swampy life hackers also pointed a fan at the gas burner, trying in this way. The situation in Murmansk isn't any better. The city looks like a set for an apocalyptic movie. In a high-rise building, the pipes burst. Water gushed out there, which then froze and turned into ice. And there's no electricity there either. The regional governor says that, in the best-case scenario, it will take weeks to restore the power supply.
And
the authorities, as usual, couldn't care less about the regions. Federal TV channels even refused to provide full coverage of the large-scale blackout and loss of heat in Murmansk.
Murmansk and Severomorsk lost partial power from bad weather. 5 power line supports collapsed from wind and frost. High alert was declared.
Let me remind you, Murmansk is having trouble with electricity and heating because of an accident.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism, and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine Today. Join us now.
Belgorod has plunged into cold and darkness. It was hit by the most powerful airstrike since the start of the full-scale war. This is revenge for Kyiv, as not a single barbaric shelling of Ukrainian cities goes unanswered in kind. With his energy terror against Ukraine, Putin has condemned his own people to extreme survival conditions in the harsh Russian winter.
The blackout is slowly but surely spreading across the territory of the Russian Federation. Following Belgorod, Taganrog, and Perm were also left without electricity, water, and heating.
Nothing has changed. The district is still disconnected.
Judging by information in Russian public forums, Belgorod was the first to come under a massive strike. On Saturday, the city was attacked almost 100 times after 9 p.m., and local residents counted up to 50 powerful explosions.
Ukrainian forces tore Belgorod's power system to shreds, once again leaving tens and hundreds of thousands of people without electricity and heat, which will be a catastrophe for the local population given the current 15-degree frosts. Kyiv unleashed holy vengeance in response to the energy terror in this region of Russia, where the occupiers are based and from where they launch their raids. On the Kharkiv region,
the attack was so effective that the Russian authorities had to hastily invent yet another set of tall tales to somehow justify the scale of the destruction and the inability of Russian air defenses to counter Ukrainian drones. As a result, the region's governor, Vyacheslav Gladkov, spun a story that the shelling was carried out by a HIMARS multiple launch rocket system. It was supposedly its debris that local residents found near the explosion sites.
Guys, good evening. The city was just shelled 3 times. Here we are, driving up to the house, and this kind of chunk is lying here.
However, the object that Kremlin propaganda is passing off as a HIMARS fragment doesn't stand up to any.
This has faced significant criticism. Consider a microchip, especially if this is the crucial internal electronic component of a sophisticated missile. That is exactly why I strongly suspect that the discarded scrap metal fragments found at the site, well, the electrical thing that the eyewitness showed, most likely, it doesn't actually belong to any kind of weapon.
It turns out that Putin's much-praised Russian air defense can't even handle ordinary Ukrainian drones anymore. After the latest attacks by the Ukrainian armed forces on the Russian capital, the Kremlin is pulling more and more forces toward Moscow, analysts explain, leaving the regions behind, effectively without any air defense. The same air defense that remains, due to Ukrainian blackouts, is operating with major disruptions.
Russian air defense simply doesn't have time to respond. And, as is well known, it has been significantly deprived of power and greatly reduced after numerous series of strikes on this very air defense system in various regions.
But instead of patching up the holes in their air defense, the Russian command is making a much simpler decision. A very specific, detailed order.
To systematically conceal and suppress every single piece of relevant data and detailed reporting regarding the ongoing military strikes and aerial bombardments that have been occurring in the city of Belgorod, as well as various other strategic locations across the region.
However, how can you avoid nationwide panic when the blackout, personally provoked by Putin and unleashed by his war, is spreading across the country at an unprecedented speed? The list of cities and regions currently without electricity and heat includes Murmansk, Severomorsk, Zakymsk, Oryol, Taganrog, Rostov region, Podolsk, Zaraysk, Khimki, Zakhovsky, and Elektrostal.
Moscow can no longer cope with the consequences of the air war it started itself.
Could peace really be near? The security guarantees document from the United States is 100% ready, and now Ukraine is awaiting information about the date and place of the signing. This was announced by the President of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelenskyy.
Specific security guarantees for Ukraine make it possible to set a concrete date for the end of this war. This is both a war in Ukraine and the end of a potential war in Europe, because these will be security guarantees for Ukraine, which is part of the future European Union. For us, security guarantees are above all this, as well as bilateral security guarantees with the United States of America. The document is 100% ready. We are waiting for our partners to set the date and place where we will sign it, and then the document will go for ratification to the United States Congress and the Ukrainian Parliament, according to our agreements.
There are also European security guarantees. They also provide for Ukraine's accession to the EU. According to Zelenskyy, Ukraine is expected to join the European Union as early as 2027.
Other security guarantees for Ukraine are European security guarantees. This is a coalition of the willing and, most importantly, membership in the European Union. These are economic security guarantees for Ukraine. We want the year 2027. We are talking about a specific date when Ukraine will be ready. That is, technically, Ukraine will be ready already in the first half of the year of 2026 to open all clusters. In our view, it'll be fully technically ready in 2027.
The president also noted that Ukraine's position regarding its territory remains unchanged. Ukrainian territories are not up for negotiation. But Russia is trying to force Ukraine to leave its eastern territories. And the reason for such a position
is clear. So that Ukraine would not be present in the east of our country. The reason is obvious. They set this as their goal. And that's why it's absolutely clear that they want to achieve this goal. At the front, they have not been able to do this yet.
Zelenskyy noted that Ukraine's and Russia's approaches are fundamentally different, but at the same time, the American side is trying to find a compromise between these positions.
We are fighting for our country, for what is ours. We are not waging war on the territory of another country. That's why I think, what questions could there be for us? Yes, these are two fundamentally different positions. The Ukrainian and the Russian ones. The Americans are trying to find a compromise. We are agreeing to communicate in a trilateral format. These are the first steps, perhaps, toward finding that same compromise. But for a compromise to happen, all sides need to be ready for it.
The president explained that talks in the trilateral format are just the first steps in this direction. He also added that achieving any compromise requires the willingness of all parties involved. And he emphasized that this applies not only to Ukraine and Russia, but also to the partners involved in the negotiation process. As reported by foreign media, the American side is even hoping for a personal meeting between Putin and Zelenskyy in the near future.
The official representative suggested that if the next trilateral meeting in Abu Dhabi is more successful, it could lead to a meeting between the parties in Kyiv or Moscow, something that has not happened for many years. We believe that these meetings should take place before the leaders meet. We think it's not far off. If we continue moving along the current path, we will reach that point, the American official added.
Let me also remind you that before the meeting in Abu Dhabi, Western media reported that Ukraine was being offered $800 billion to withdraw from Donbas. But Zelenskyy made it clear regarding Donbas. It is not for sale. Let me remind you that Russia recently stated that Ukraine must also give up the Donetsk region. And this is their key demand. But let's return to Zelenskyy's statements. The president of Ukraine made them during his visit to Lithuania. In Vilnius, Zelenskyy met not only with Gitanas Nausėda, but also with the leader of Poland, Karol Nawrocki. They agreed on energy support for Ukraine and strengthening our air defense. Zelenskyy also met with the leader of the Belarusian opposition, Sviatlana Tsikhanouskaya. That is why the president of Ukraine also spoke about Belarus, or more precisely, about its dependence on Russia.
The people of Belarus still need to achieve real security in their lives. So far, Lukashenko's white spitz has been granted more rights than the people of Belarus. Unfortunately, there was a chance in 2020 to change this, and I am sure there will be another chance. But at that time, there simply was not enough support for the Belarusians. And now we all feel how much more difficult, more expensive, and more dangerous it has become for everyone because of this dependence.
You think about this? Write to us. The Kremlin is not ready for real negotiations to end the war and is stalling for time. This is how a top official from foreign intelligence assessed the current state of negotiations to end Russia's war against Ukraine. In addition, Russia is ramping up its military industry. So what is Russia doing to prolong the war, and will it intensify its attacks on Ukraine? More on this in the following report.
Do Russians want war? The Kremlin's not ready for real negotiations to end the war. This was reported by Ukrainian intelligence. According to Oleg Legavsky, first deputy head of the Foreign Intelligence Service of Ukraine, Moscow is currently betting not on dialogue, but on buying time. The Kremlin is counting on the offensive at the front and energy terror with blackouts to break the Ukrainians and impose its own terms.
The energy system itself is Putin's target. His goal is Ukrainian society, which he wants to pressure the Ukrainian authorities and force them to capitulate.
A representative of Ukrainian intelligence also commented on the so-called red lines of the Kremlin in negotiations. According to him, there are several of them in Russia, and they are adjusted from time to time. Among the key demands are that Ukraine does not join security alliances and that there are no foreign troops on its territory. At the same time, Legavsky emphasized that Moscow can formulate new red lines at any moment to drag out the negotiation process.
Russia is ready for negotiations. Russia wants negotiations about Ukraine's capitulation. And Russia is ready to negotiate Ukraine's capitulation. The United States, more precisely. The Trump administration is ready for peace negotiations. They're not interested in the parameters of peace at all. They are interested in a ceasefire. Russia is interested in the cessation of Ukraine's existence, in Ukraine's capitulation. We are interested in a just peace.
Other facts also indicate that Russia is not actually interested in peace. The Kremlin is ramping up military production to continue terrorizing Ukrainian cities. In particular, Russia has begun using a new high-speed model of drone, the Garin 5, against Ukraine. At the same time, the key components for these jet-powered drones, according to Ukrainian intelligence, are supplied by Chinese and Western companies. This was reported by the British publication The Guardian. Since the beginning of this year, 2 such drones have been shot down, one near Kyiv and the other near Dnipro. The Garin 5 has a flight range of just under 1,000 kilometers and can carry a payload of 90 kilograms. It is believed that Russia hopes to further extend the weapon's range by launching it into the air from a manned jet aircraft.
Russia wants to bring Ukraine to its knees, to destroy it as a state. That is Putin's goal. He is ready to achieve it by military means or by any other means. If it can be achieved through diplomatic means, especially with the automatic lifting of sanctions on Russia, that's just a bonus. And we see this, the Europeans see it, and America sees it too. Everyone has different goals. Our task is to survive. The Europeans' task is to maintain stability on the European continent and to prevent the Russian threat from the east. Trump's task: to add another checkmark for himself. I stopped another war, and preferably to make good money from it. Or rather, not just preferably, but necessarily.
In order to generate a truly substantial and sustainable long-term profit from this particular business venture, by carefully implementing strategic financial planning alongside consistent daily effort. In this comprehensive and detailed guide, we will explore exactly how to achieve that ambitious goal effectively.
At present, there is an increase in the number of drones of this type. Shahed drones equipped with video cameras, online and radio modems, compared to the total number of such UAVs. The implementation of such upgrades requires the use of specialized equipment and the presence of operators who have undergone the necessary training.
Among other innovations reported this year by Ukrainian intelligence are Garin 2 drones, which are reportedly equipped with man-portable anti-aircraft missiles to target Ukrainian aircraft, attempting to intercept them. All of this points to one thing. Russia has no intention of stopping the war. On the contrary, it is doing everything to intensify and escalate its attacks.
The Bashar al-Assad regime in Syria was overthrown back in 2024. After the fall of his rule, Assad and his family went to Moscow, where they were welcomed with open arms. As a loyal ally of Russia in the Middle East, but a similar realization that Syria is lost to the Russian Federation has only just begun to dawn on Putin. And what do we see? Russia is withdrawing its troops from Syria. In the region of Kurdistan, the 24 maneuvers are currently taking place in the open for all to see, signaling a significant shift in local dynamics. Simultaneously, there's widespread talk and growing speculation regarding a sharp reduction in the Russian military contingent currently stationed in Syria. This potential withdrawal raises questions about the future stability of the area. Furthermore, the global community remains deeply concerned with the ongoing and complex situations unfolding in Syria, Venezuela, and Iran, as these nations continue to face intense political and social challenges that resonate far beyond their own borders. We hope Russia will lose all its allies, and that every country where Putin's cronies, the dictators, ruled will become free. Trump admitted that the U.S. used its new secret weapon. This happened during the operation in Venezuela to arrest the dictator Maduro. In a tweet, the American president called the weapon a disco bombilator and said he was forbidden to elaborate on it. But experts are already suggesting that it is the latest development in the field of energy weapons. More details to follow.
America's enemies are terrified. Washington has invented and already tested a secret weapon on the battlefield. According to Donald Trump, the first use occurred during the operation to capture Venezuelan dictator Nicolas Maduro.
Discobombulator. I can't talk about it. They never managed to launch their missiles. They had Russian and Chinese missiles, and not a single one worked. We went in, they were pressing buttons, but nothing worked. They were fully prepared for our attack.
The word discobombulator translates from English as to confuse or to disorient. Following the statement from the head of the White House, the Pentagon also confirmed the existence of the new weapon.
Lethality refers to the inherent capacity or the specific quality of a substance, condition, or action to cause death or result in a fatal outcome for a living organism.
Traveling at the incredible velocity of light, we are witnessing the unrivaled strategic dominance of advanced directed energy weapon systems, which are fundamentally reshaping the landscape of modern technological warfare and global security. Dizziness, nausea, headaches, and hearing problems.
We were on alert, but suddenly all our radar systems shut down without any explanation. The next thing we saw were drones. Numerous drones were flying over our positions. At some point, they launched something. I don't know how to describe it. It was like a very intense sound wave. Suddenly, I felt as if my head exploded from the inside. All of us started bleeding from the nose. Some people were vomiting blood. We fell to the ground, unable to move.
The US does not hide it. The weapons successfully tested in Caracas may later be directed against Beijing and Moscow.
3 nights ago, in downtown Caracas, Venezuela, nearly 200 of our best American fighters headed toward the city center. It seems that the Russian air defense didn't work very well. Do it?
But the US is far from alone in its developments. Most advanced powers are actively investing in the development of weapons of the future. Laser cannons as air defense systems are capable of shooting down both small drones and missiles, as well as large aircraft. Such weapons are being actively introduced into the armed forces of countries like China, Britain, France, and Israel. In 2023, Japan became the first country in the world to test so-called railguns. This is a weapon in which, instead of gunpowder, a magnetic field is used to give the projectile its initial velocity. The shift from explosives to electromagnetic technologies has taken the speed of projectiles to a whole new level.
The firing speed is approximately 2,300 meters per second, or accordingly about 8,000 kilometers per hour, with a power of up to 5 million joules NFC. The operating principle is an electromagnetic mass accelerator that propels a conductive projectile along 2 metal rails using the ampere force.
In addition to railguns, superpowers are also working on electromagnetic weapons and cannons. The so-called EMW, by inducing high-voltage current and high-frequency electromagnetic pulses, disables electrical and electronic equipment. In this case, we are talking about both military equipment that uses electronics, as well as missiles equipped with modern components, their own target-seeking radars, homing heads, or even simple GPS navigation receivers.
At the moment, it is primarily the defensive potential that is being developed, but the development of offensive weapons is not ruled out either. That is, not only countering aeroballistic strike systems, but also directly destroying the launchers themselves.
It seems that's all. What can Putin and his occupiers respond with? These are old Soviet-designed missiles as well as new so-called unparalleled ones. Non-existent know-hows that so far exist only in propaganda cartoons.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Launch at Washington.
The Kremlin is losing influence in the regions. Protests in Bashkortostan are growing. Underground companies in Bashkortostan are mounting resistance, and members of the movement are painting graffiti. A zeltik is a word in Bashkir that means freedom. In addition, leaflets addressed to Bashkirs have started appearing in public places. They say that the time has come to stand up to the Russian authorities. The underground calls on people to join them and support protests and acts of sabotage on behalf of the unit.
To the military wing of the Bashkort Company. There is still time to stop the triumph over the peoples of Eurasia. There is still time to put an end to the Kremlin regime.
For direct hits, Ukraine struck the important Russian plant in Belgorod with Flamingo missiles. This site is a contractor for the production of Russian military aircraft. This was reported by OSINT analyst. The strikes targeted the Skif MIF facility on September 23, 2025. Satellite images confirmed that all 4 missiles hit their targets.
Analysts recalled that the Russians claimed that, supposedly, only 1 out of 4 missiles reached the facility. However, judging by satellite images, all 4 missiles reached the target area, with a deviation radius of less than 80 meters. The largest area of destruction was 25 meters. Analysts shared that Skif M is a high-tech manufacturer responsible for up to 70% of the production. The enterprise is intended for aerospace materials in the production chain of MiG aircraft, as well as Su-34, 35, and 55. And
what do you think about the results of the Ukrainian missiles' performance? That's all for now. Give this video a like and don't forget to subscribe to our channel, Ukraine Today, so you don't miss our next episodes. See you next time.